shi pu ki
아니 다랑게 람 말려봐 아니 가소래서 님보지 량 고그래
So as J. Lama Tsongkhapa says in his abbreviated Lam Rim, this life of opportunities surpasses even a wish-fulfilling jewel. Such is found only once this time, so hard to obtain, yet so easy to lose like a flash of lightning. Seeing this nature discard all worldly activities, and just like winnowing the chaff, day and night make it meaningful. I, a yogi, practice this way. You who seek liberation should do likewise. So here, as it says, this life is extremely difficult to find, and once found is something that is greatly meaningful. On the basis of this life, we are able to achieve whatever sort of goal we wish. We can even achieve Buddhahood. And at this time, we have met with a qualified teacher, and we have the sort of freedoms and opportunities that allow us to be able to progress along the path. So recognizing this fortunate opportunity that we have now, we should strive to make this life meaningful, to take its essence or use it for a good purpose at this time when we have it.
Oh yeah, that is a new Lembala, Takare Sana, and it's Chitukawa. Roche Tuka, Chituka, what then around the Dawata, don't want me to Parajas, you are in the Chituka. Duji de la Yang, and the Dakaras, and the Ori, two girls, and the town to Niwa. Oh, do go what they do go to Dawata, don't want me to any. Frances Yoba is a Druga, Drum Nidi, Tadashuva Nashi, and a Tade, and a Dangy China, and a castle. The bed, Chajukanga Town, she Tinjanda, Navi Tinjakan, and a Kanga Tawa in town, and then Drum Nuba. Oh, Drum Nuba Mazata Castle, Tean, and a Takarasana, Setila Drugawa. Settle and Drukode, and it's Simati, then Tennessee Yabakawa in the Settle Drukaba. Tean, and a Casore, Tadani to Drukava, Serawa, Namchilang Mabasari, Namjim Mabasang, do some younger in town, and a chair Druke, Drumni, Tean Settle Druke. Settle a dog with a chimatin and the Dishia Kawa in town. Oh, there are Tadani to do good. Anita, oh, Namjilang, Meba, Samikala, that do saying, Anita, oh, Namjilang, Tadani to do good in town. Tana to
No. So to take the essence of this life or to make it meaningful, we need to accomplish the Dharma. We need to make effort at doing the Dharma. So we all naturally have a desire to have happiness and to avoid suffering. But in order to accomplish that, the way that we are able to accomplish that is by practicing the Dharma. And right now, this life that we have, this life of leisures and opportunities, we have the ability to accomplish the Dharma in this support, in this life that we have now. So right now, all of the good sort of conditions are collected, all of the internal conditions necessary to practice, as well as this kind of external circumstances that we need in order to be able to use this life in a meaningful way. And so it's not just that we have this opportunity now in this life, and we have the ability to make it meaningful, but we also need to do this from right now. There's no certainty how long we will have this life. The time of our death is uncertain, when that will come, and so we can't put it off to the future. We need to do this from right now. There's no certainty as to how long we will live or when we will die, and as this life, this kind of good support with freedoms and opportunities is extremely difficult to find, there's no certainty that in our future life we will have this kind of same support, these same conditions necessary to practice Dharma. So we need to then accomplish the Dharma from right now. There's no certainty about what sort of life we will take in the future or how long we will be here in this life. So right now, while we have this opportunity, while we have the ability to accomplish the Dharma, we should take it up immediately, doing it from right now rather than putting it off.
Oh yeah, that tender in the Kasore, Satanic Dupti, and it Setilan do go again, and it I can get a Savicana Dupti, Shedala, that country you are as an Anita, Jews in Jelanjirimba. 당분에 마무시고 또 말와 저 제람지를 많이 배가라 아니 저 충을 남지를 봐 남주배 때 아니 저와 치마 온들리된 아니 텐도니 배 아니 대체도 저 충을 남지를 봐당 되네 될 때는 아니 체디 나시안 도네 치마 온도 삼이 공부 되니 지로 러게당 되네 치매 나시안 도네 아니 타바 되니 그 러게 아니 교든 그 남지를 받치당 아니 코타다라네 얼지는 좀 깨네 아니 교든 그 남지를 받치체 되네 교 치매 남지를 봐라 동아지 나서 쌈바나 아니 동아지 나와라 미세병에 좀 깨와이나 내좀 깨디자마 텐라와데 아니 섬제 현지도 삼대잖아 시안 동아지 나와라 미세병 이제 깨체네 원인제 대기 아니 참배 아니 치료자와 섬제지 텐도 아니 도자라는 뭐 양다바 소비 사제지 고마 덤제지 아니 교 준비 남이름 봐 전에 아니 남이름 봐 라로 정거와 딱지는 말 와.
So at this time where we have this life, we need to accomplish the Dharma. And as for the Dharma that we need to accomplish, what is this Dharma? It is the stages of practice for the beings of three scopes. So this contains all of the teachings, and it begins with a being of a small scope who is looking for a good rebirth in the future. Having turned away from the sort of appearances of this life alone, they're looking to gain a kind of higher rebirth in the future, turning away from this life and recognizing death and impermanence. And then it progresses to the trainings for the being of middling scope, who turns away from the appearances of this life and recognizes as well that one wants to escape from all of samsara, to get out of cyclic existence completely. And so seeing the sort of defects of samsara, the being of middling capacity gives rise to this mind striving after the freedom of liberation, and at that stage then contemplates all of the sufferings of samsara and how much one wants to be freed from those. And then progressing to the being of great capacity, one in the way that one contemplated all of the sufferings of samsara in relation to oneself, then applies those sufferings, seeing that all sentient beings are in this same kind of state, and giving rise to an unbearable compassion that is unable to bear the sufferings that other beings undergo. One then, for the purpose of being able to achieve unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment, in order to be able to help other sentient beings, trains in the trainings for the being of great capacity. And so, in this way, this is the kind of dharma that one applies oneself to make life meaningful.
Oh yeah, that tender 아니 저 숨지람 이름발 로장발라 아니 다 통마 다저 대진에 가서 되네 아니 치와입니다 봤삼네 다저 수완하시지 예비대한대야 요리도 맨내봐 아니 내가 치와 아 남지랑 내가 매봐 치비지 치용을 치마도 생각한 거지 마변봐我대대대라 아니 군제레레 군제 숨수당 아니 군제레레 삼버간라 아니 영예월 치치거와 타제바당 태양 체들라 치거와 타제바당 아니 최마도 생 관계장 아니 코나체바 타제바 숨게나네 아니 지금 메다보고도 마용체 와 대치위체는 아니 가서 남지랑 내가 매치비 체양 아니 체마도 생각한 게 매변봐 아니 치비 체양 매도 미를 발야가나 그 지수단데 아니 제와 량거와 제와 량발라야 아니 기래살라 아니 안도데 된도니래 맞아봐 아니 안로다 내로 제와 대양 내가나 그 지수 장와 인상 아니 말아도 다 6개월 개월 채워진 시도네 거봐 미게 와나네 강음 휴식이 주바인배 이장 된지리된 점토발라양 주름 거와 가사 시원하시 전에 아니 단조지 대사 된지 토발라네 아니 가사 시원하시 전에 침지 전로 로와 투명오다 미관제부터 다와 따도니 세가나 주른 아바타베 시송아 뭐는 저만 배 참제바 지수 파진지 그 도자와 들거와
So one needs to then train one's mind in these stages of the path, beginning with recognizing the great value and rarity of this life that we have now. It's very difficult to find, and it's something that is greatly meaningful. And then one progresses from that sort of contemplation to thinking about death and impermanence, recognizing that death is certain. We have to face death, and the time of our death is uncertain. We have no way of knowing when we are going to die. And at the time of death, the only thing that can be of benefit is our practice of the Dharma. So by contemplating in this way, coming to the three sort of conclusions, these three conclusions, recognizing that our death is certain, the time is uncertain, and only Dharma will help at the time of death, we then are able to turn away from the sort of affairs of this life and engage in Dharma. So we have to contemplate these various points, looking at how it is that we have to die and that only our practice of Dharma will be beneficial to us at that time. And so with death, we recognize that, well, after death, one has to take a rebirth, and that rebirth is going to be either in the higher realms or the lower realms. And this is determined by the karma that we have accumulated. For virtuous karmas, we will experience good results in the future, and for non-virtues, we will have to experience suffering. And our nature is such that we engage in much fewer virtues than non-virtues. And as I was saying yesterday, the only way to be certain of getting a human rebirth in the future, a good higher rebirth, is by protecting one's ethics purely. A foundation of pure ethical conduct is necessary in order to be able to take a good rebirth. And so that foundation of ethical conduct combined with the practice of the 6 perfections and brought together, conjoined by stainless prayers, this is the way that one is able to achieve that good rebirth in the future.
오야 안내라 수준나바 다바 생각에 안내 캐라면 수준다 중세기장 미게 주본 거 수준 나서 안내 캐라면 수준다 중세장 명가와당 자라 안내 수준다 가와 중화잖아 안내 예와 샤도 믿어봐 안내 카도라 안내 배 시켜봐 아테레지고 말해 텐다와지 당하라도 연야대 신도네 카바 인장 안에 다 가르서네 내내 대마게 안에 가서래 뉴트 출연나바 다바 매나 안에 대부터 가서래 된다지에 명야
So pure ethical conduct is refraining from even the slightest sort of negativities. And when we do things that are contrary to this ethical conduct, say, for example, we've decided to abandon the 10 non-virtuous actions and we are restraining ourselves from that, when you do something that goes against this ethical conduct, one then needs to engage in the practice of purifying, confessing. So at this time, where we have this life which is very difficult to come across, this is something that is extremely difficult to find, we need to recognize that without pure ethical conduct, there's no way to gain a good higher rebirth in the future. This is indispensable.
미게위 내라니 아니 강함 수수지 좀 봐. 주고와 인상. 개와지 주바데 제이나야 아니 정어 주서 상와지 매봐. 미게와지 주바이나 아니 배 정어 주서 상와. 텐디지다. 개와 또 충하당. 미게와 또 체외. 아니 시위체나 내가 그 미기래 제수 동아 인상 아니 미기위래 되우더라 아니 동아 미개와라 동아 중 대신한로 탐자도 내가 따도 대화에 제와군도 대화 자기가 아니 다 된로 제제기 주매 마상 만로 제제기 주프스 주 강가 배 차네 차도 가라 다 만로 제와제 배 타쳐 봐 마산 menju telane do kange toba churu se kana sumba nasi chene ngando jeju ki ju chande kala ani ngando jewa ta chewa nganso de jena ni ta da shiwa nasi tene o dunga je ra shila mada ba yeah.
So, engaging in virtuous actions is very rare for us. So, this life that we have now, our future life will follow after the virtues and non-virtues that we accumulate. And the power of our virtues is very weak. We tend to, when we do virtuous actions, we don't have all three, the motivation, the actual action, and the conclusion, purely virtuous. Whereas when we engage in non-virtuous actions, the sort of motivation, the actual activity, and the concluding activities are all present, and they're much more powerful. So the power of virtue is said to be very weak, and the power of our non-virtues is very strong. So here, where it says that in order to gain a good rebirth, a higher rebirth, one has to have this cause of ethical conduct. We must recognize that if we don't have the complete causes for gaining a good, higher rebirth, then we'll definitely go to the lower realms. If we haven't completed all of the causes necessary, then we will end up going to a bad kind of rebirth. And then we proceed to the sort of contemplation that all of samsara is in the nature of suffering. From taking up these contaminated aggregates due to the force of karma, we won't in any way pass beyond this nature of suffering.
Oh yeah, then the insan ani luruge 가서래 rab도 차신 창와이 냐왕내와 지신탄 조금 다게 봐이 이자 다장 참바자 가서들이 요것이 저 봐이 텐도 다장 제바 아니 텐도 다장 참바자 rab도 차신 창와이 냐왕내와 지신 조금 다 리다탄 담안에 다지 텐도가 고제 그 동아가 텐도 대단 참바자세 인자 아니 제가 치마 강도 제위 아니 저와 대단 되게 동아대 타네 참바체네 아니 다른 미리 남지 내지特别 가브들이 아니 대다도 매제바게 아니 주대다 봐 도바치고래세 다디 지등에 좀 말아 저면 제만 가서 잠불리에 대접 뒤에서 만지지 아랍도 dim시 개발차 잠불리에 때 개발차 대비 터서 안에 가도 제제기 주 아랍도 dim대 안에 개발대 빵빵고 그래 전에 송해 말해
So, as Master Nagarjuna says, there are some verses of his which describe the kind of sufferings that various beings in the lower realms endure. So the hell beings have the sufferings of hot and cold, extreme hot and cold, and hungry ghosts have these sufferings of hunger and thirst. And animals are under they are controlled by others, they have the fear of being eaten by others, and so forth. And so if we recall the kinds of sufferings of these various lower rebirths, if we keep them in mind, then we recognize that whatever sort of rebirth we're going to take in the future depends upon the actions that we engage in now. So we need to train in the complete causes in order to take a good rebirth in the future. Those who want to be able to get a higher kind of rebirth need to avoid, restrain themselves from engaging in any of the causes that would lead to such a suffering situation. So keeping in mind the sort of sufferings that we may encounter in the future if we don't collect the proper causes, we are motivated to then engage in the trainings.
안주를 깨나 아니 안성기 동안 빠던 바 용고와에서 안주 동안은 지신 장에 텔레 주변에 봐 아니 군저선을 여봐 이십이 권에 이십 아니 이십이 권에 군저선을 잡수 주에 점저당 아니 점지 납잘라 투문의 투문 많이 비추신라 납잘라 라고야당 아니 렌젤에 이제 대파제는 아니 그디글라 나도 수신도 주바데 다 주충이 갈기 아니 총과다도 신발에
So, if we are born in one of those suffering situations, we recognize that in that situation of suffering, we won't be able to accomplish any sort of dharma. And so, having fear, having a kind of anxiety at taking a rebirth in one of those suffering situations, we then recognize that the triple gem, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, have the ability to protect us from those fears. So, again, these are the trainings for the being of small scope, recognizing that the triple gem has the ability to protect one from those fears. One then takes refuge and takes up the common and uncommon trainings or precepts of refuge. And this is linked again to the kind of confident faith, recognizing that karma, cause and effect, is infallible, recognizing that certain causes will lead to certain results. So having a strong, confident faith in karma and cause and effect is again one of the contemplations at this stage.
Oh yeah, that 말을 쉬고 되는 막 고야 되는 면도 단도 막 람저 코로나 가서 통구에서 당하시 못 같이 그래와 너나다 가서래 다르다기 단조지 땡상보다 내지 토베 값이 아니 거의 핀조라 맞아봐 마게 섬제 담저 코비나나 동아수제 냠다바 되남 아니 동아 주단 제와라 다위치도 아니 토잘라나 바야다바 저베 사제죠 고마를 뭐지 진해져 토바차 아니 대치도 아니다 남전나선 그sab지 아니 배 가서래 세냐 뭐 그런 군적이 대제지 공부시에체 담비 그들의 정규와 이제 마시 뭐가 적어서
So then to begin with this text, we should think having a good motivation, recognizing that at this time, while we have this precious rebirth, this good support in order to be able to practice, we should take advantage of this and recognizing the fact that all mother and father sentient beings are suffering in this situation. We should think for the sake of all of those beings, we want to attain the unexcelled, perfect, complete enlightenment in order to be able to help them, to aid them, and work for their benefit. So at this time, while we have this life, we should think that we are going to listen to these teachings for this purpose of attaining unexcelled, perfect, complete enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings.
Oh yeah, 当然嘛，学个人的，这么老想嘛这些是吧？那么个人们就说个呀，结婚是不是就对个我们有个出门亲戚了嘛，那对呢，这样下来，咱们那说起，现在用我起来第三次，得了，咱们叫提前嘛六吧就。这些女士绝对对为让所有大家全面方面找我用些满足在些全部基本经济的过路就检查来对什么就相关的出现叫我按照咱们这人别讲这样来没理说对去做咱们说是在这个点呢实际连这我给我前辈而且早晚呢结巴的判的程度抗性我把拉是些大谈的他有点理性了拉是当然好了就嘛就去些给了在每当我都开始上了他去年被切了滚浪的大家喜欢拿钱切的啊你挂着抢救个生就滚来让我就给我切啊你去年被带了啊你就捐送吧你什么家的你小多少的你靠不把个捐送吧当啊你听见这些我的对些出点别关的在他来沿路他动作来嘛是毛开些的沿路上你去什么家托马送本地去年把咱们都马上是他告诉的你什么间当知道吧滚浪间去滚浪了捐修吧的是吧我的 최년바 정도 마세 아니 퇴삼 공부사 퇴 삼바당 공부 삼공 현 강라야 가치와 가치와지와 이장 거미게 강도 좀 미저 저 군론라来吧인상 군론 정말简单 차단 모습을 써봐 견도 글로기다 인장 데이터 군론의 가도 있나야 해쳐봐디 바디 다 최소도 자디 다 뒤숨 아소래 뒤숨지 자와 탐제 가나시베 람보체 사숨지 되메 지부 자주 남지는 바니 인진 야다 두고를 말해 야 주세요.
So we don't need to, everybody, or most people should have the English here, so we don't need to read through all of this here. But in order to listen to this Dharma, we should have a motivation of bodhicitta, this aspiration to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And here it describes the way that we need to try to listen to this teaching with a pure kind of motivation. We should avoid the three problems of the pot, as they're called, being like a pot with a hole in it, being like a pot turned upside down, or being like a pot that is dirty inside. We should avoid those kinds of faults and cultivate the 6 perceptions of being a patient and so forth when we are listening to this Dharma. And so whatever action we undertake, this sort of force of that action is determined by the motivation that we are carrying with that. And so it's essential to have a good motivation. And not just that, but we should have a thought that we're not just going to hear these teachings, listen to them once, but also engage in contemplation and meditation following this. So we're now on like 32. Now there is a great highway along which each and every Buddha of the 3 times travels.
오야 대한 안에 다 자주 남지는 님보 남소다 어디 남지 저 남봤음 와 남지 남봤음 아니 의중 자세 양답에 따와서 뭐대 남지 남봤음이라 대한 현대도参加와라 저 최도 저와 섬전현 아니 농만 주당 제와라 다데 토절라는 뭐양다 뭐 저기 산제라 고비 텐도 문도 라니参加와라 산제지 공부한테 두고 그래 산제지 공부한테 두고 대두발라 아니 두주 쉬고 대라야 아니 두주기 쳐대 태우고 와 태와 태양 아니 말람 강 퇴지돼야 남만어 와시라 쳐고 봐 이배 아니 다람 다 쉬어야 돼 장고정어 첨보기 장된 누지 낭으로 아니 샤조 자모론도 차원봉아 왕타바게 다 누구신가도 꾸마신가도 차원봉 왕타바라 쉬네 아니 차원봉 왕타바라 아니 다 자주 남지 림바기 아니 바 뒤네 아주 자세 양답에 따왔으면 뒤네 아니 남지 저거 남았으면 뭐디 아니 가서래 숨바 되게 단 되게 텐데 가 치마 비야셔도 디나시야
So here, this stages of the path to enlightenment. It is this teaching that we are receiving is the single guiding lamp for beings, for living beings in the 3 lands. It is this none other than this teaching known as the steps to Buddhahood, and the heart, the very life of this teaching is the instruction on the 3 principal paths. It continues, we would all like to become Buddhas so we could help others, but to do so, we have to work to achieve this state. So in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings, if we have this motivation of bodhicitta, we need to ourselves get to that state of Buddhahood in order to be able to help them. And so in order to do that, we have to first know the kind of stages of the path and then put them into practice. So this instruction on the 3 principal aspects, being renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view, encompass all of the kind of trainings and stages stages that one goes through. And so this teaching, this gives us a kind of path by which we are able to achieve that. So this was composed by Manjushri or Manjugosha as he appeared to the great Lama Tsongkhapa. And this teaching was given by Tsongkhapa to Ngawang Drakpa from the Sako district. So this was who actually requested this teaching.
Oh yeah, Satini, Lamzo di Lamji Zo Namsundang, Lavrila Jusumji Tando Ludang, Sajak Kapar Mado, Ani Lamzo Sumganala, Ani Lavin Kapakanga Dio, Waida, Sajak Kapatam Le, Turn Lavrindan Jayang. That's Sajak Chizuki, Ani Chuji Sud Zabares. Sajak Chizu, Chuji Sud Zabakandes, Sana, that Landed Kote, Anita Casore, Jew Chungula Yaja Chidang. Ani Landed Kote, Jew Drilla Manja, such a Mindawa. Chibola Indicana Maranzo, Lavringina Caso Kain Sanatane, Imbochida Lembe, Jew Chunga, Tumon, Nyambulams, Telatinic. This is your Caso. Chima, Rowan, you do some Chidachima, David Tap them by us, Chidachima, Chidachu, Rowan, you do some Chidachima, David Tap them by us, and each every color. Chidachima, Rowan, you do somebody under doing somebody check. Chidachima, David Tap them by landed at Jamro Chegana, landed at Jamroni Gala, landed, and it you chung Yajar. Jew Chung the Chongola Jar Yajar. That and then Lamjin also landed, and it you chung Chongola Majaba, and it you drink Chongola Majagore. Landed Milu, Koya Dungana, Yanas and a Cheman Nasha daughter, and so on. Landed Gorte, Jew drink a march. Charmado, Tiri, Tandachila Marazo, Lama Chabanala, Tesera, I saw Dunga by a Medina in a good some like Jabjosians. The Bongo Tata Tumbal, let anyone Ballon Tato Sikala, Jutila Majaktua. What landed Gorte, and a Jew Chung La Java Chidai, Jew Jin La Java Chiki, such a middle Chabatiris.
No. So here we speak of the three principal paths while teaching on the steps to Buddhahood. We talk of the practitioners of the three different scopes. So here the three principal aspects give the teachings for the practitioners of three different scopes. And it says then, aside from this distinction in the names we give them and some differences in their section divisions, the teachings on the three principal paths and those on the steps to Buddhahood are essentially the same. A separate teaching tradition has developed for the present text because of the different categories it employs for the very same subject matter. So here, other than some differences in the sort of section divisions, the topics or the way that they break down the topics into an outline, the teachings of the three principal aspects of the path and that of the sort of stages of the path, the Lam Rim teachings, are quite similar. So the differences really come in where they put various sort of section headings. So in terms of the teachings of the stages of the path, the contemplations of karma and going for refuge are contained within the sort of teachings of the being for small capacity. So thinking about how to get a good result in the future life, how to be able to achieve that, they contemplate karma, and thinking about the sufferings of the lower realms and so forth, cultivate a sense of refuge as or protection of the three jewels, turning away from the sort of sufferings of the lower realms and seeking to gain a good rebirth in the future. Now, when it comes to the three principal aspects, here we see that the text puts these sort of together, they come together with the being of middling scope. One needs to, by contemplating karma, turn away from the pleasant results in this ocean of life, and then to turn away from all of samsara in general and seek renunciation. So the sort of contemplations on karma and refuge get mixed in with the being of middling capacity. But all of these stages of the path, and as well as the teaching on the three principal aspects of the path, deal with the same kind of subject matter, but it's just delineated or divided differently.
That's right. She's oh yeah. So subject to the that do Lama Chopatang, Lamzo Dudang, subject Chetan, the Chipaya, any Nibuchita Lembu Chu de la, Jide Rindu Chiva Jesus about the Jinechima Chita Jua, and Rowan Jidu Sambas. That Jidenchim David Taptamba said, and it jumped down, Japsuni would the Castle Landing would the Jew Chunga Yajar, Tandandila landed the Jew Tuna Marchara, that and the Tashizarwa, did it so. Oh, that didn't no. Saja Chizuji Chijisu the Jabares. Lamzo Sumni Donga Cho Kang Chang, that Lamji saw double. 소신다고 예배 나완디 아니 가서래 디지 디숨지 신바시 고그래서 다 가서래 남주 남바스 무엇을 줄라 있지게 아니 디심바시 대마이 마이나야 아니 다 가서래 대다기 배 상주기 심지 지심바다 담아도 베셔로 그 내중기 지심바지 와지 고그래 남주 숨니 동아지 쳐 강장야 남지 소신다 보이배 나완 디숨지 지심바지 고그래 그냥 내중기 지 마세 내중기 삼바 배 제마 잠지 마세나 제마 마인바 마세나 내중기 삼바 제마 잠지 마세나 안에 탈바 규당 라 탑이 좀 좋아 노중게 삼바 지어마 마인바 지어마 잠이 주나야 아니 타베 주더와 아니 자주게 셈이 가지어마 잠지 지 마세나 타베 잡아 그 줄메 줘봐 자주게 셈 지어마 지어마 잠지 지세나 아니 타베 잡아 주더와 대신도 양답에 따위 지세나 아니 거인이 뭐 줘와 와 돈이도 베셔라 기체세나 코인이 좋아다 현도나 안에 소나 마임비 메기 위레지 안로당세요 소나 마임비 메기 위레세나 소나 마임바니 메기 위레라세와 소나 메기 위레지 되부터나 안로당 소남 dengon 게위레세나 소남 일레세나 가라 더빌하다 미 아니 펜지지레들라 아니 소남 일레세와 소남 dengon 기미함 소남지 레지 동건 함이 세데 소남지 레기 더빌하다메 펜지기 레데라 아니 소남지 레스 난도 펜지기 레데라 아니 소남 많이 바면 미기 레스 다 강고만 인수 펜지기 레데라 미오빌레스 미오빌레지 수수메지 하르게 다 개와 채와지 이나 내중도 마세나 개와 되게 되고들라 아니다 개와 강가 개와 돼 소남지 레이나 안에 동강기 제 소나 많이 빌레이나 안도제 미오빌레이나 알레디 되불라 안에 수수메 클라제 야
So again, these divisions then of the various topics are slightly different from here, where it's putting karma and the contemplation of refuge together with the first sort of contemplations and the contemplation of renunciation. Whereas in, for example, the Lamrim as well as the Lama Chupa, we see, for example, the verse that says, "Aghast at the searing blaze of suffering in the lower realms, we take heartfelt refuge in in the three precious gems and seek your blessings that we may eagerly endeavor to practice the various means for abandoning what is bound to misfortune and accumulating virtuous deeds. Therein putting the contemplations of refuge and karma in with the trainings for the being of small scope or capacity. So here then, these three principal aspects of the path are like the main beam that supports all the rest of the roof. Your mind must be filled with these three thoughts if you hope to practice any dharma at all, whether it be open or secret teachings of the Buddha. So when you have a mind which is held with renunciation or caught up in renunciation, that leads to freedom from cyclic existence. And a mind filled with hopes of becoming a Buddha for the sake of every living being brings you to the state of omniscience. And a mind imbued with correct view finally serves as an antidote for the cycle of life. Otherwise, as it continues, you can do non-virtuous deeds, what we call non-merit, and take a birth in one of the lives of misery. Deeds of merit will only lead you to birth as a human or a god, and those deeds that we call invariable will lead to taking birth in the form and formless realms. So here, if one engages in virtuous or non-virtuous actions and one's mind isn't held with renunciation, one doesn't have this sort of thought that is holding one's actions, then whatever sort of causes that one engages in will only become causes for taking future rebirths. If it's something that is non-meritorious or non-virtuous, one will end up in a life in a suffering situation, the lower realms, and deeds that are virtuous, activities that are virtuous, will lead to birth as a human or as a god, and these that are invariable or unmoving will lead to rebirth in the form or formless realm. But it takes having this thought of renunciation conjoined, holding one's mind with this attitude that leads to activities going beyond samsara. And if one's mind is held with this attitude of bodhicitta, then one's actions can become a cause for achieving Buddhahood. But if one doesn't have this attitude of renunciation or an attitude of bodhicitta, those activities can't go towards the causes that we want.
Oh yeah, that didn't. That lamjosum je masena ane talun tile, ane chacha mo komedang, ane sanga nyima ge tojiandang, ane sanga sama ge jezo da tanya dadang ge mira ya ma de tenda la jila la ge wa de jezo so kanda shi gomlo che jang te tamje, ane da sa jia ni ne ji pongbo di jeje ge koyun ju le ju zhuwa la ma do, ane samba nge jun da chang ju ge se ji ma sen ba yin zang ta ba da tamje chen ba ge ju lu chuo da miang zhuo gu ma de se men zhuo de men zhuo.
So if one doesn't have these three principal aspects of the path, if one hasn't generated them within one's mind, then it says you can pretend to practice anything, from doing meditations on the channels and winds and drops to the great seal or Mahamudra, the great completion or Dzogchen, these generation and completion stages, whatever one likes, but it will only lead towards another rebirth in samsara. So until we have given rise to these three principal paths, until these fill your thoughts, each of these profound practices can only bring you back to the cycle of birth. They can't even begin to lead you to freedom or the state of knowing all. So without these three principal aspects, there's no way that one can hope to gain liberation or the state of omniscience.
Oh yeah, mi zhuo de ge xi pu zhong wa jiang a wa la, pu zhong wa la jiang a wa la, ri bi niang a la ke wa. Dinge de dambo toba, ri bi niang a la ke wa. Dinge de dambo toba, mo xiang a dan damba. Ane chu ba ji, chu jian jie toba ji dang. 我听着几当，那朝全比明暗的，原来其他些嘛，其他话些马街讲是长久南极人吧，其他话些马街讲明啊，你了那些担保现金落了就没多你意思，那些担保给你现金让不个白落了就没多吧，我听这个。 요도 미도바 니라 초 칸라 담 숨발라 아니 장아위샤네 로벤 네 람지르바 줄라께와 따쇼스 람지르바데 칸제시 예남세 디지주 예냠도 카조담도 코와양 디담그레스 야게 어네다 무상하다 잡아도 조전제 조화제 토바다 어딩에 담보 토바 어텐조레 람디 담데 람지름 바데 지주이냐도 카조담도 코와데 딜라 담데세 리벨량라 카와당 띵에들라 까베 파도냐 바 샤투바당 엄마시와 나단 담바당 주바시보 제토바 테남 마라도 어제 참면 바시 제장스 개왕아 먹는 시간만 부터요래 아니 가서 3대 수매라 게요래 뭐시 토요래 주전 주바제 토토래 생활들이 뭐정하단 담바다 주바제보 제토바는 어제 참면 바시지 제장 아니 사전일이 풍부 코안들라 마대 대방마도 코알레 마대 마바所以长久咱们人啦，我年呐，你把考完到的起是按照个啥叫年龄一步步考的了，办到的，按照考的咱差个的，
So here it says then, we find it in the question that Geshe Puchungwa asked of Chengawa. So his question that he asks is, let's say on the one hand that you could be one of those people who has mastered all 5 sciences, who has gained the firmest of single-pointed concentration, someone with each of the 5 types of clairvoyance, who's experienced all the 8 great attainments, so someone who has gained all of these kinds of knowledge in the 5 sciences and so forth and clairvoyance. And then let's say on the other hand that you could be a person who had yet to gain any full realization of Lord Atisha's teachings, but who nonetheless had developed such a firm recognition of their truth that no one else could ever change your mind. Which of the 2 would you be? Would you choose to be? So here in the second case, one has only gained a sort of recognition of Lord Atisha's teachings, but so firm that one couldn't have one's mind changed with respect to that. And Chengawa spoke in reply, Master, leave alone any hope of realizing all the steps to Buddhahood. I would rather even to be a person who had just begun to get some glint of understanding, who could say to himself that he had started off in the first of these steps to Buddhahood. And why would he choose this? In all my lives till now, I've been a master of the 5 sciences countless times, and countless times I've gained single-pointed concentration, even to where I could sit in meditation for an eon. The same with the 5 types of clairvoyance and the 8 great attainments, but I have never been able to go beyond the circle of life. Never have I risen above it. If I were to gain a realization of the steps to Buddhahood that Atisha taught, I would surely be able to turn from this round of births. So here he's saying that he would surely much rather have a sort of stable beginning of understanding of this path to enlightenment, because this is something that he has up until now not been able to attain, whatever sort of great attainments he's had in the past in countless rebirths.
Oh yeah. 아데 샤야 안에 잠시 치우잖아당 제도지 나죠와 아니 기슈게 저 토바 자주게 삼단 잡아 연장 아니 제도지 나죠가 기슈게 저 토바 다 아마고 주요와 나시 어 텐저게 로지 따르 인 지진 전배 양지 아니 장고 정거 첨보라 코위 예매다 아니 타비 파연 토미 전시 나래 때네 다 코와 그 예매당 와 코와 동아제 라신이베 코와의 제단 동아제 라신라 마대바다 어다 타비 파연 토미 전시 나래 때네 아니 체디 나세 코에 나세라 체디 나세 치매 나세라 로도 미더와 아니 마대와 아니 야스바 코와 그 창자신스 차비 파연라 샘잼이 미남 겁나해 내줘라 영화 맞던 봐 아니다 진바다 주르서바 쌈대지 계속 강답지 강 공장 아니 가서를 타비주 때는 민주배 타바고 때는 민주배 타바 대바 남지 통마를 아니 가르고 그래서나 당아 강서와 현 탐제 시안에 당 내중을 조금 차고 그래 내중이요 야
So, in the same sort of vein, there is another point conveyed by the stories of the Brahmin son by the name of Sanakya, who was a master of meditation in this practice called low diamond. And so the gentle voice, or here Manjughosha, said it to our protector, the great Tsongkhapa. So he's talking about here the need to have a mind of renunciation. So suppose you fail to devote some part of your practice to thinking over the various problems of cyclic life and the different benefits of freedom from it. You don't sit down and meditate, keeping your mind on trying to open your eyes to the ugliness of life or holding it on the wonders of freedom. So here one needs to contemplate these defects of samsara, of how nothing within samsara passes beyond the nature of suffering, and think about the defects, the faults of samsara, and give rise to a strong sense of the benefits, a desire to strive after the benefits, the state of freedom from this cycle of birth. And so you don't reach the point where you never give a thought to the present life. You never master the art of renunciation. And let's say you go out then and try to practice or develop a skill in some great virtuous practice, the perfection of giving, ethics, patience, joyous effort, or staying in concentration. It doesn't matter what. None of it can ever lead you to the state of freedom. This is the case if we don't have renunciation. No matter what other practice one tries to do, one won't be actually going towards that state of freedom from samsara if one hasn't yet given rise to this strong sense of renunciation.
Oh yeah. 다테니 대신지 남 두바보 대신지 남 공방 교기 안에 다 가려서나 란데 유지의 견세대 아니 란이제 란데 유지의 집을 란이 집을 시와 텐징로 좋아 란진진기로 안에 란이 집을 시와 텐징기로데 집을 시와 텐징기로데 란데 유지의 견당 란이 진중 구박군주고 만남전지 연단 군지시 선에 라마 초반나라 송화선 나신 전에 란제와 전바데 아니 네와 탐적이 중국말 구바 탐적이 아니 고인바인상 란데 이제 그 견당스 현재와 전반이 아니 가서 만남제순 대라고베도 타야 연단 주용 고토네 조화대다 다가 쏠래 지와 전바 친지로 소와 나지전에 현지와 전반이 현재我现在你判了天气推了点呢是那么去把它说完那些天点呢俺甚至了两万对比是我那不样让你那不样七度七把甚至现在都那不样大把做个三件就恐怕他把对比甚至了两万对比没那么呢没那么恐怕马先拿没那恐怕没那恐怕马先拿아니我什么去那给叫康财长아니 남도 주고 말했어 남도 주고 말 남도 민주 됐어 야现在呢，给咱们让的一起往前呢，满北钱就把西都准备起了，是给咱钱，先别给300马钱呢，让你这人给300，给那两百，过什么就给这行钱哇，他们钱，俺呢，他们给钱就把就把西都出过来，
So if someone is then interested in practicing the greater way, the Mahayana, so one needs then to generate this attitude of bodhicitta, and this involves thinking about setting aside time to think about and consider how harmful it is to concentrate on your own welfare and how much good can come from concentrating on the welfare of others. So when, as it says in the Guru Puja, that this mind that cherishes, or that cherishing ourselves is the doorway to all torment, while cherishing our mothers is the foundation of all that is good. We seek your blessings to make our core practice the yoga of exchange of self for others. And here one contemplates the fact that this self-cherishing attitude is the door to all suffering, is the cause of all sorts of bad things in the world, and therefore we recognize its defects, its faults, and on the other hand contemplate the great virtues of this attitude of cherishing others. So as it says within the Guru Puja, the mind that cherishes all mother beings and would secure them in bliss is the gateway leading to infinite virtue. So by contemplating the defects of our self-cherishing and the good qualities of cherishing others, we can then give rise to this attitude such that all of the virtues that we do are going towards that goal of Buddhahood, of reaching unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. But without that kind of attitude, all these virtues can go towards is a sort of lower enlightenment, a lesser state of just gaining our own freedom from samsara. So in order for our dharma, our practice of dharma, to become that of the Mahayana, one has to have this attitude of first renunciation and then a strong compassion for others. So this, as it says here, is similar to what happens when you are unable to practice the various aspects of renunciation deeply because you have failed to devote some time thinking about it. And if you fail to devote that kind of time, then all of the virtues that you try to do will only go towards becoming the causes of a rebirth in cyclic existence.
Oh yeah. Maybe change to basi to do it. Benang is young la change tembi minam komba majanas. Ra, Nijula change tembi minam komba majana, Bewa Tamja, Najaji. 往前呢，会就把西的就切把西弄，在地开始送过来，在那来的什么呢？等于说话，都在上边过呢，考完了线路，那么就马年那是马街那是吧？你。 他把团结记录测咱们的局外，这些根据的多个人才能送啊，这才几百人，是吧？也就那前些电北恐怕马线呢，给我他们家记，哪些记往前呢是彻底，哪些记往彻底的，然后哪些记往前呢？啊，那可以就把些了多个人才得当，哦，老人全部个都在上边过呢，考完了线路，就中年电机才通完那些。 考完了线路，那么就马家呢，他把天爷给落的，这咱们做个人是，啊，那个什么就给我扛起来，他们就规矩的做个人是，可以就把些都做个人，是的，等你几百人把的，
So again, if we don't contemplate bodhicitta, then virtues performed without that sort of attitude will only go towards what is known as a lower enlightenment. And this is similar to what happens when you are unable to practice the various aspects of renunciation deeply because you have failed to devote some time to thinking about it. And so every virtue you do is affected by your concern for this present life and only leads you back to the cycle of birth. So as it says in the great stages of the path by Je Lama Tsongkhapa, if one doesn't think about the suffering, the truth of suffering, then one's renunciation or thought to definitely emerge from samsara will only be words. It won't be anything beyond that. We have to contemplate and give rise to a good understanding of the sufferings of samsara such that you really have a genuine wish to be freed from them. If you don't contemplate in that way, think about the sufferings of samsara, there's no way that one can turn away from the appearances of this life, from our concerns with this life. And as long as you are still affected by the concern for just this present life, then all of the virtues that you do are only leading you back to taking another rebirth in samsara.
Oh yeah. 我军政天呐。 안에 다 가서래 내중의 마심바게 안개와 가자 코와 바시 줄서 괜찮 되나 말아서에 당아 강세와남 세와 강 삽세와남 아니 바샤네 아니 통망 내중당 아니 찬섬라 영화 텀바징 와 차고 와래 코와다다 동아지 라신도 통화라 응야라 체대 나신도 고아래 체대 나신도 발라 통마 아니 지우충을 남은 주고 아래 이라 통마 체대 나신도 아니 치민 나신도 봐용고 안에 치민 나신도 되가라 내주제요 인자 통마 내주다 자선라 영화 탐방에 영화를 찾고 대개와다 내주다 자선라 영화 탐방 개와다 아니 걔네 개와 강지 고수미 개와 택게 개와 탐제 내중 비선바자이나 근중 비선나 다르바 규조와당 자주 비선이 주나 탐제 첨바 그 규조와 인장 대개와다 되는 개와 탐제 타바다 탐제 첨비 규로 아니 와면도 줘외 윤전 되나 니라 아니 남자는 이거 찬সম라 공부를 미줘봐我没做把切把呢蓝金那电脑嘛些把运送呀。
So, in order to give rise to this attitude of renunciation, one has to then turn away from the sort of concerns, the appearances of this and future lives. And this begins on the stage of the being of small scope by turning away our sort of concern for future life, or for this life alone, thinking, turning away from the appearances of this life, and then we turn away from sort of all grasping at the appearances of samsara in order to generate this attitude of renunciation. And so here, in order to be able to practice, say, the great vehicle or even higher teachings than that, we need to first gain fluency in these attitudes. So it says here, it's a definite necessity then first to gain fluency in the attitudes of renunciation and the desire to achieve Buddhahood for every living being. So set aside for the time being all those supposedly profound practices, the secret teachings, and so on. Once you've managed to develop these attitudes, every single virtuous action you perform leads you, despite yourself, to freedom and the state where you know all things. So here, once you have developed this attitude of renunciation by turning away one's concerns for the appearances of samsara, and once one has developed this attitude of bodhicitta, wishing to achieve unsurpassed perfect enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, then whatever virtuous actions you engage in will naturally go towards the cause of liberation and omniscience. But so long as one hasn't generated these sorts of attitudes, then the virtues that one does only become a cause for further cycling in samsara. So one needs to then make an effort to develop these kinds of attitudes, setting aside those sort of higher and more profound teachings in order to have a sense of renunciation and bodhicitta.
Oh yeah. 대만 세와 인수스 도금 세와데 자금라치 자금 쳐발라세 다 자금데 개체수디체 요즘 자서 양답에 따와 과마라 토마 자금 담이 막에 단존에 송데 시라게 파데라 아니 곰 탐제 자금 아니 자금 주도 아니 미바데라네 제주도에 조금을 채워마도多把参嘛结完了，加工开始学的来文吧的，是吧？人家多工些加工来切吧，加工切吧来切了是。咱们就做我那么什么的呢？俺那他假如说了他们这些因为接触我的是，说了他们这些看着来是啊，俺那他把他们这钱包特别给他说嘛送我去买吧。他把他们的钱包，他们去做的，他们的钱包特别，他们去做的，俺这做看着说呢，我就参加杨大别打我的，我们说参加杨大别打我，我专门的去出前年去送吧，他们家，俺那杨大别打我了，说我给，俺那咱们说什么别特别去的送吧。那他说的， 송바시와 제와 메비수 미시반년 저와 참조바 대다 퇴정하여 터주다 르바자다 그는 주바제 세가나 시주 친이스 송바 탐제 태권한이 또베 타수 마송와지와 마레스 또니 또베 타수 마송와지와 마레스 연상 소라 수 제위 소라 탐제 안지 이 관대단 제와 그 대대 주심지 남제람 지름발라 도야 대야 대나네 안에 자주남제름 대자주남제름 봐도 대야 남조심도 뒤뒤인데 아니 다 가서를 뒤와 이산 점전 취수 송바 탐제 남조좀 남지 남바 조선 유래기 왜 타서 마서 와지 자네 매봐
So here, where after this quotation it says, what we mean above by mental review meditation is the type of meditation where we choose a particular line of thought and analyze it. So here, analytical meditation, thinking through the various reasonings for these points is a crucial type of meditation, beginning with recognizing the importance, the great difficulty of finding this precious human rebirth, and even before how to rely upon a virtuous spiritual friend. All of these are generated by engaging in a kind of analysis, doing a thinking sort of meditation on these various topics, such that one then gives rise to certainty about this. And so here, now the three principal paths are the top of the cream skimmed from all the holy words that the Buddhas have uttered. So here, the three principal aspects contain all of the teachings of the Buddha. They've been sort of packed or condensed into these three principal aspects, in particular into the correct view. There's nothing within the teachings of the Buddha that does not lead to this correct view of emptiness. And so all of the teachings, all of the words of the Buddha, these three principal aspects, and in particular the stages for the beings of three scopes, are sort of like the cream skimmed from the top of all of the Buddha's teachings. So the meanings of these words and commentaries upon them have all been packed into the paths for practitioners of the three scopes. So all of the Buddha's teachings are contained within that. And this teaching has all been packed further into the teaching on the steps to Buddhahood. So this teaching in turn has been packed into that of the three principal paths. So all of the Buddha's teachings are contained within these teachings on the three principal aspects of the path, which are in turn condensed into the three the sort of teachings for the three types of beings.
Oh yeah. 산제 토비 탑바시도 송신이세 톱제 산제 토바 제발라 아니 산제 공부 토바 제백이 톱제 주대라 아니 탑다 시람 이거봐 탑신이라 라고봐 주 탑신이 뭐나네 아니 탑왕의 중당 차선이 오대다 시라 양답에 따라 로고와 인장 주 탑신이라 로고봐 대의지 조니 창조의 선단요 답신이 나는 조어데 다 창조의 선단 양답에 따와니 탑기는 조어데 특별 준비체라 창조의 선단 양답에 따와니 창조의 선단 양답에 따와 되니 귤라 깨발라 다 내라 라니 코위 핀조라 셴바 땡네 로데 엘레랑 코와라 탄디지 의중게 삼바 천이 참와지 마제나 단이지 깨봐 깨세매봐 진주 가서 랑그 텐도 된지sem 미람 등야 만내나 아니 현지 텐도 갈라게 시선이 송하나 시선이 랑그 텐도 된지sem 세를 갈라 라니 코비 동아제 나도 삼디 갈라 아니 코와라 샴바 떼나 로바게 내주지 마제나 섬전신 아니 동아제 나와라 아니 미세비 이제 제가 매세 로 진주 가서 됐어도와 가서래 아니 라브리 쳐보나라 가서 랑 코베 동아지 나서 삼바나 바부 요구 좀 매봐 semjenxian dong'al jeji na wala misubi inji jesa mebe chani asungba yinzang o ta yinzang o ni chani changwa ji je wala ani jiwu zhenda tungwa wina lo jani kuwa tada kuyi pinzo la xianpa dingna la wati ta ta jing kongdu xianpa na xi ji o gogu wa de so xianpa dingna la de ani kuwa la tandu ge nge jung ani chani ba ji je tela dene ani ninji je ge
So all of these teachings then, every single thought expressed in the holy words of the Buddhas and in the commentaries which explain them was uttered for the sole purpose of helping disciples to attain the state of Buddhahood. So all of these teachings are for that purpose, are methods for us to be able to reach this state of complete enlightenment, to reach the state of Buddhahood. And to achieve that state, one must verse himself or herself in the two causes that bring it about. These are called method and wisdom. And so method is this desire to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings and the bodhisattva activities that go with that. And wisdom is namely the correct view of emptiness, this wisdom realizing emptiness. And in order to develop those sorts of attitudes in one's mind, one necessarily has to have renunciation as a prerequisite to that. So to develop these attitudes in the stream of one's mind, a person must first gain an absolute disgust for all the apparent good things of the life he himself is spending in the circle of births. So here, one needs to have this attitude of renunciation before one can generate a kind of compassion which is unable to bear the sufferings of other sentient beings. So Shantideva says in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, referring to this wish to gain freedom from samsara, if one hasn't had this kind of wish for oneself, even in a dream, then how on earth could one possibly give rise to this wish with regard to other sentient beings? So if we have not yet generated an attitude where we wish to be liberated, freed from this cycle of samsara, then there's no way that we can give rise to the wish to free other sentient beings. We necessarily need to have this attitude for ourselves. So, and this is also articulated in the Great Stages of the Path by Je-Lama Tsongkhapa, where he talks about the fact that if you've never had the thought to achieve a kind of liberation for yourself, then there's no way that you can have this compassion, unable to bear the sufferings of others, unable to bear their sufferings within samsara. So we can't want a liberation for others without first thinking about it in relation to ourselves. So this thought to be freed from the cycle of existence is the sort of necessary foundation for these other thoughts. So suppose you never manage to develop a desire to get free from the cycle of life yourself. Suppose you never reach a renunciation which is complete in every respect. It will be impossible then for you to develop what we call great compassion, the desire to liberate every other being without every other living being from the cycle. This makes renunciation a without which nothing, or something that is completely indispensable to generating this kind of compassion.
Oh yeah. Pinzola Chamba Dinan, the Koala, Ram Koala Tandu Jungi Samba Tama Jamajana, Samjan Sian Koala, Dradu, Ninja Chamber, Missibe, Yizang, Ninja Jevala, Toma Ram Koala, never Juba, Nejunde, Meta Mebare, Semeta Me, Nejunde Meta Me. Anita, Topja Suku, Casa, Topja Della, Chusuku Kuni. 格外提议丢个，说那么一些操作性，说那么一些来讲呗，他们过年掏啊小，现在说完那些钱呢，掏这确实就过年，确实就过年我的主这个就做我的啦，俺那的水果主节，说那么就操是做水果主节的啦，俺那是三节个过水年间的呢，做水果主节的啦，俺那水果主节就说那么就操说吧。 做的说那个错个呢，做的强就生明白的，说个就举做的强就生的。 아니 초고주 그 주조대 조 초고주 그 주, 이些个错是吧？我秋过这个就做的了，完了一些错这里，我秋过这个，完了一些个错的，看来啥呢？东西都没写的，一些就错的，那确实杨大伟大话他都来出版是，秋过错把切把啦。俺那吃托这个，俺那托把了爬都接这个，俺你们把自己只把你帮过的，你们把的自己只把你帮这个，你们太多得了，俺杨大别打门了，俺那你们把的自己这边你不帮门的吧，是吧？你们给做当成马日吧。当时马日巴帮这个年不得，俺那当时马日巴个咸鱼顺穷啊。有当把你特别落进门了，俺这当时没人把帮门的吧，你是有没把你太帮忙的也你嘛也，原来叫那年这吧，这当大少帮忙的，太大有了马多吧，人家去做最近门，现在说那些现在，你是有没把你，你太帮忙的要没，当时马日把个咸鱼拿都出啊，这水用啊，这马嘎巴，俺这大门把没到。那没把多年我孙子马多把了，俺那人嘛帮，俺那帮没都把一张，他多了嘛推用过的，一张一些个做进那七学年养特别大完了，特别我呢，咱们那他们这，咱们这什么子对呢？两岁两把的。俺呢，接人不起来，我说这，俺呢，准备样去接人不起来，我说这个咱们七八千人是呀。
So, we need to have this attitude of renunciation as a prerequisite for being able to achieve the objects that we are striving to attain, namely the two bodies of a Buddha. So in order to be able to attain that, in order to achieve the Buddha's body of form, a person must first gather together what we refer to as the collection of merit. And so this gathering depends principally on the desire to achieve Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. So the collection of merit is primarily referring to this attitude of bodhicitta and the actions motivated by that. In order to get to that attainment, we have to accumulate those causes. And then to achieve the Buddha's Dharma body, a person must have the collection of wisdom. And here the most important thing is to develop a correct view. So the wisdom realizing emptiness is what allows us to collect this collection of wisdom, which is the antidote to our afflictive emotions, and not just afflictive obscurations, but when conjoined with this compassion, the antidote to our obscurations to omniscience. And so in order to be able to counteract those or develop the antidote for those, we have to develop this wisdom realizing emptiness in order to reverse these afflictive emotions. And so in order to to be able to generate these, you have to first have this attitude of renunciation, wherein one recognizes that we have to engage in a kind of spiritual practice in order to achieve this state of enlightenment for ourselves and then be able to work for others. And so there's no way for this practice to serve as a path of the greater way unless you have the desire to become a Buddha for the sake of every living being. And there's no way to rid yourself totally of the two obstacles unless you have the correct view. So in order to be able to actually remove those obstacles to the state of omniscience, we have to have this desire to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, as well as this wisdom realizing emptiness, this correct view, which is the antidote which allows us to remove totally these two obstacles.
Oh yeah. 而且，咱们前边建议，太阳俺这他妈落气是找我让英雄过的，那么落气是找我让英雄过的是，俺这快说的彻底分做了，俺我就往去，先把老板去， 是吧？我了嘛个说那些，谈出你个吃了龙吧，一来过呗，吃的那些多说那些钱呢，落确实着完了，俺了吃的那些爱就吃的那些多把钱，但呢，吃的那些多把给爱就。是吧？吃的那些的病，爱就给就穷当，吃的那些的话给俺就顶了顶过的，他妈我这种这个他妈落子确实着完了，爱就当。得了你些，去提不起被咱们都着完了，是的，得了他，我他东啊街上现在烫呢，哎，天这边爱就给长的，俺呢告诉的。有些钱被长呢，俺呢吃都下个什么？你告诉什么？他们讲，俺呢两代了，隔壁吃都，俺那个那么样的吧，作为三节就恐怕他们这个380呢，去提不起被，咱们都找完了，抢救去是我第380呢，俺呢提不起被确实找完，然后抢救去是。日本人我说帮完了，是他情况就喜欢那些，做他把了，他就解决个这把，你要么没这把，俺你恰当么说，当时马里巴拉说都什么当，俺你西极这把，俺你拿出吧，把家的接吧，我说帮完了，俺你看着人是那样，但别打吧，没把赢呗。凭什么咱们就做完那种写送是啊？
So there's, as it says here, there's no way to turn your mind to spiritual practice unless you have renunciation from the very first. So here, renunciation can be divided into renunciation, which is turning away from the appearances, from the clinging or grasping at the appearances of this life, which corresponds to that of a being of small scope who's thinking about future lives, as well as the renunciation, which is turning away from the appearances of future lives as well, striving for liberation from samsara. So there are two here, forms of renunciation, and one needs to generate, at least at the minimum, turning away from the appearances of this life in order for something to be a practice of Dharma. And so with that kind of renunciation, then one can enter the great vehicle by bringing forth great compassion, thinking about the fact that all other sentient beings are in this kind of suffering situation. And so in order to, so this practice, there's no way for any of this practice to serve as a path of the greater way of the Mahayana unless you have the desire to become a Buddha for the sake of every living being. So upon giving rise to this attitude of bodhicitta, which is brought forth by a compassion unable to bear the suffering of sentient beings, one strives to achieve this state of Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And then it says there's no way to rid yourself totally of the two obstacles unless you have correct view. So there's no way to remove all of our afflictions, all of our this mind of ignorance, which is grasping at a self, and the three poisons of ignorance, attachment, and hatred, the various obstacles or obscurations of dualistic appearance and so forth. All of these obstacles can only be removed by the correct view, this wisdom realizing emptiness. So in these three principles then, renunciation, this attitude of bodhicitta, and the correct view are what allow us to achieve the kind of goal that we're striving after.
Oh yeah, I need that concept, ma. Lam ji zo na me da me be, lam ji zo na ba sum sum xian. Da lam zo sum bun di la, se ga la, mo ju chan se yang da be da wa sum bun di la, nyang wa xi tuan qin jie. Ane 钱是确实找我信用，我真让个国什么给我扛钱上，给我扛钱讲，俺那是380什么几谁的钱我印章，俺那确实找我信用，你什么几马钱呢？马钱呢？俺那种马钱呢，可以举来马点不的，是吧？公众上美国呢，可以找我来到你们的马钱呢？ 마시나 코란 주비 람마인 도바 람마인 발라 람도 치송네 아니 나와 되면도 좋아지 연구래 전에 오지 라루처만을 소환하시 전에 와 디숨지 마세나 지제 코인 줄라 마대와 인데 야
So this then is why these attitudes are spoken of as being the three principal aspects of the path, as these are the three sort of necessary things that we need. So once you've gained some facility in the three principal paths, everything that you do becomes a spiritual practice. So once we have generated these kinds of attitudes and our mind is held by them, then all of your actions will become spiritual practice. If your mind is not filled with these three thoughts, then everything you try leads you nowhere further than the same old cycle of rebirths. So here in the greater steps to Buddhahood, or the great stages of the path to enlightenment by Je-Lama Tsongkhapa, he says then that suppose you try to perform some kind of virtuous deed, but you have yet to find that special antidote that destroys your tendency to crave for the good things of this circling life. You have yet to succeed in that meditation where you've analyzed all the drawbacks of the circle of life using the various reasons set forth above. So we have to engage with thinking about these various types of attitudes, this attitude of renunciation, then generating bodhicitta and the proper view if we are going to actually make our virtuous activities go towards that particular goal.
Oh yeah. 다진디 꾸준히 거네 코비사와 레다 녀몽바니 마시나 코알라 초비 람마인발라 람도 손에 아니 뭐 가래겨와 되면 조그레서 다진 룸데 다진 티체 오 맞잖아 코비들라 마대와 인데서다 나야 러리 첨어라 대단한 코알라 남단 두마를 님에서 따데서 다 코비 사제 일이 풍부들 친절라 아니 동아지라 신라 마대바 오늘 시아바기 아니 동아 코아치 동아당 소수 동아당 제가 나지 동아라 소와 탐제 아니 사제 일이 풍부들 발라다나 연구와 연장 대단한 코알라 남단 두매 님에도 따데 권배 거의 핀조라 세밤 아니 세바데 되자르와 거의 핀조라 세바 신진비 년보 된데 세바 신진비 년보야 많이 년보야 많이 다음에 비트는 소소도베 셰럽지出신的마체 다음에 비트는 내가 파지 아니 소소도베 셰럽지出신的마체 장집지 셈밀라야 콤바 쳐바다 트라베 개조 남니시 장주의 셈이라 세나 어느 곳에 장주였습니다. 대한답에 장주 셈이라 공부다 자유의 개조 남니 다 라그시면 소는 신기 틀어 때마 가르마도 아니 신기 틀어 때마 가르 타바다 탐데 심비 주종을 주조와 연구를 말하시야 코르제지 그 뒤에 도그래서 꾸준한가 와도에 코요 뒤텔라 코요 코로코와 이노서 뒤텔라 때네 아니 코르 판자 마도바 제 반자면 밖에 와서 콜로코와 있는 예수바 인
So here again from the Lamrim Chema, or the great stages of the path by Je-Lama Tsongkhapa, one needs to first think about the defects of samsara. So if you have yet to find that special antidote that destroys your tendency to crave for the good things of this circling life, you have yet to succeed in that meditation where you've analyzed all the drawbacks of samsara using the various reasons set above. So one needs to contemplate, think about the defects of samsara, the various sufferings, the sufferings in general, the sufferings of the individual kinds of realms, the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death, and so forth, in order to really give rise to a mind striving to get out of that situation, striving for liberation. So in order to generate renunciation, one needs to contemplate the suffering, the defects of samsara. And suppose, too, that you still haven't been able to investigate the meaning of no self-nature as you should, using the analytical type of wisdom. So if one hasn't yet been able to investigate and come to a determination of the meaning of what it is to lack a self or a self-nature, then one, again, will not have this cause which leads towards liberation. And let's say further that you still lack any familiarity with the two types of desire to reach Buddhahood for every living being. So these two types of bodhicitta, aspirational bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta, one needs to have those sorts of attitudes in order for one's virtues to go towards the cause of Buddhahood. So it continues saying, if you happen to do a few good deeds this way towards some particularly holy object, you might get some good results, but only because of the object's power. Otherwise, everything you've done is simply the same old source of suffering, and you come back round in the round and around the round of rebirth. So as long as we don't have this attitude of renunciation, the correct view, and an attitude of bodhicitta, then whatever sort of virtuous activities we try to do will only go towards being a cause of taking another rebirth in samsara. They won't go towards the cause of liberation or omniscience.
Oh yeah. So you go no she sumba yes. Turn dila kona ane kadam be koma jang. Gomji la su re dang. Genji nga re gui lai wang de samji chi chi me bai lan ba re se. Ta rang ge ane sa kwa ya ge. Gomba cha ba ge la su sai ane sa gu kwa ya ge la su re dang, la su re dang. Ane la tenda we la de ju bi che do ane la de ge nimbo ni la so ba ge dan ju nga re ane gui la yo re se wang de shi gui la yong ge de ane o de 가서 사대 두빈 줄 들어와라. 난 대화 대당 사수 공부대 사태단테 아니 공빈 줄 들어와라. 삼지 최시 매배란 말에 삼지 최 간절해서 만달라야 최수 들어와라. 아니 체제 나시안 도박에 아니 개와지. 엉이 흉기 쓴바치 만달라 고고하네. 되네 치미 나시아 도박 되네 아니 체제 나시아 되네 최수 도 치매 나시안 되나 아니 기부 증기 최수 도해 아니 자주 무슨에 기부 침비 최수 도같이 연구가 인자 검지 사수래당 전주 응아를 꾸라 온데 삼지 70매 배량바 인세 오다 삼지 7 되지 매나 아니 최수 도고 말해.
So here, then, they like this quotation from Gelama Tsongkhapa, this where if you don't have these three attitudes, then everything comes back around in the round of rebirth. So the Kadampa masters of old used to say, were making the same point when they used to say this, that everybody's got some like meditational deity they're meditating about, and everybody's got some special mantra that they're talking about. And all because nobody's got any real practice they're thinking about. So people were doing these kinds of practices thinking, I've got this special meditational deity that I'm practicing on, and I'm reciting certain sort of mystic words or mantras to that deity. But if they don't have these attitudes of renunciation and bodhicitta and the correct view, then that practice, it doesn't become a real kind of dharma practice. In order for something to be a dharma practice, we first have to have this renunciation, turning away from the appearances of this life, from our grasping at that. And then we have to turn away from the grasping at the appearances of future lives, generate renunciation, seeking to get out of cyclic existence. And that then makes our dharma one of the being of middling scope. And then in order to enter into the Mahayana, to become a practitioner of the great vehicle, we have to to generate this attitude of bodhicitta, of wishing to be able to attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And so, and then we have to generate this kind of wisdom, recognizing that there is no self. And so if you don't have those sorts of attitudes with one's practice, then no matter how profound the practice may be said to be, it doesn't go towards actually being Dharma practice.
Oh yeah. 다 대진전 대체 세다 원주샤와 나신 삼주 최신 매바 렘바 윤전 대체 라자 남자 최샤마지 원내탄의 최샤마지 최삼나 지제 타바다 탐제집이 뉴드라와시고 그래서 다로 고슴지 안에 차와 강 탐제 안에 타바다 탐제 막 뉴드라와시고 그래서 고슴지 차와 탐제 타바다 탐제집이 뉴드라와시고 고와라 대화와라 가르려래서나 안에 다 내라 남조숨라 영화 템바 거스래 남조숨라 영화 템바라 내라 단조 텐쟁이가 떠네 안에 세대 나시한테 따바다 아니 되니 렌데다 밀이 쳐 잠내가라 아니 치매 나시 따바다 내가 대라되는 게 중재와진을 때는 되니 아니 자주가 셈게요 자주가 셈게니 아니 최주셔봐 셈제 나는 뭐 양다봐做三界有恐怕톰 톱을 대비 셈기 게니 톱을 제발라 아니 톱을 제발라 파도 제발게 아니 니모바다 시지지바 본거와 인자 대본제게 년보되라 아니 남조수가 나나 양다배 따와 인자 대거와 인자 어디니 유저와지 대어와라 남조스는 영화 탐바시고 소다도 심바래
So, if we wish for doing a really pure kind of a practice, then we have to give rise to these attitudes of renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view in order that our practices go towards the cause of gaining freedom, liberation from samsara, or the state of omniscience. And so, in order to turn away from the appearances of this life, we contemplate the fact that this precious rebirth that we have now is something that is greatly meaningful and difficult to find, and then proceeding to think about karma and the results of our actions and so forth, we give rise to an attitude of not just renouncing the appearances of this life, but renouncing future lives as well, in order to achieve a liberation from this cycle of existence. So those contemplations lead to a sense of striving to get out of this situation, an attitude of renunciation. And then in order to achieve or do a practice of the Mahayana, we need to give rise to bodhicitta, thinking that in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings, one needs to attain the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. And in order to do that, then, one has to remove all of the obscurations, the afflictive obscurations and the obscurations to omniscience, in order to achieve that kind of state for the sake of all sentient beings. And so the correct view, this understanding of emptiness, is the antidote to those obscurations. And so these three principal aspects are what we should sort of take as the heart of our practice, as something that is central to the practice that we are trying to engage in.
Oh yeah. 되네 리숨니 자자 영화 탐바 리숨니 자주는 이뭐 쫓다고 인데 이제 탐제 캠베 남전 세제 자유 진짜 자주 남지는 바 그 안에 세제 자유 중라 남전당 아니 요즘 자세 양답에 따완 리숨보데 안에 남지는 바 그 남지 쏟도 채네 아니 다 자주라리 맞아버려
So these three principal aspects, the renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view, are like the heart, the very life within the teachings of the steps to Buddhahood. And so the all-knowing Lord, Tsongkhapa, once said, I used the lamp on the path as my basic text and made these three the very life of the path. So Atisha's lamp on the path, this stages of the path teaching, is sort of the basis. And then when Lama Tsongkhapa gives this teaching of these three principal aspects, renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view, are the same sort of basic topic for the teaching at hand.
Oh yeah, then that Lamden Gasoyang, a young Junction Lamden Nasoyang, Yanda Betawa somebody sort of China Tama, Shavati, that is Shavashini Tango,
So we will break there, but this three principal aspects of the path, which is like the very sort of life force within the teachings on the step to Buddhahood, this is going to be what is explained in this text.
Oh yeah, that. Jambadi, Sanje Shindu Midibu, Dogunanda Shanla Chiba, So Yida, Namindra La Kanya Daya, Ami Savoya. 다 권도야 다 지금 잠들에서 되나 권도 셔버 남조 남아서 다 개발도 마 조사니 되나 남디양 제송 남조 남수 자지기 때문에 치도지 담보와라 시다와 다 토마사제가 원도钱나 남조 남수 지치了숨但就赚饱了就不严了但就以纪律下把他去被受杀什么钱啊？他谈不得了，但是赚不了就别了得了，俺你确保交把他赚把谈去吧，俺一年把过什么月把钱，他谈不确保交把他，俺你就算那么弄了掐嚓了，是太便宜不的呀。
So, as for this teaching on the three principal aspects of the path, this has an outline to the work, a general outline. So this instruction on the three principal path is divided into these three basic topics: the preliminaries leading into the composition, the main body of the text, and the conclusion of the explanation. And so the first of these, the sort of preliminaries that lead into the composition, have three sections of its own: an offering of praise, a pledge to compose the work, and then a strong encouragement for the reader to study it well.
Oh yeah, 他就是那么弄了掐嚓了写呗，俺你确保交把的听，但就准备通嘛，俺那两个他比了恰恰高的，俺你他告诉的路边。但是学习恰恰我呢，我担保才有个写的。让你对比他的恰恰我接送是对开的是那的，但是准备通嘛了，俺的恰恰我的啦，但是准备给拍些西瓜汤，俺呢就让你就他们就把他吞把汤，他们告诉的。但给我忙不起来的，他在那地那送多了，学习恰恰我呢，我担保退过，让你对比他了，恰恰让对比了，他这个当，俺呢，女的呢，人家他们钱把他恰恰也着，如果他们家钱把的，俺呢女接我给打包印上，我们的呢人呢，俺呢告诉的，他把钱买了掐着了，我们这内的，他把写到去了，我就去做我请的担保印章，他把钱把写到去他印章的，我们这内了就钱买了掐着着，就这样了，他同志用我的就这样确实了呀，就不快乐是了，到底对内了呢，三节的全是先把它掐着着，他也是听这个。对对对，那的，俺家说的， 定义自己了，我就去做我现在担保印章，上届强数强制申报的定义自己打破印白印章，你打其他我等的钱你恰恰要给留啊，等这个你送所有钱，
So the text starts with this offering of praise, and so it says, "I bow to all the high and holy lamas." And so the first thing that one does upon composing a text or a commentary is to bow to his Lord of Lords, as the Indian master Dandin said. This offering of praise and prostration and the essence must be written. This is sort of the door for opening a work. So as we read that, and we read as well that one should bow to the one he holds his Lord. So the purpose of engaging in a prostration and offering of praise at the beginning is to bring this composition to completion, to remove any sort of obstacles in order to complete that work and bring it to its completion. And so here there are different sort of homages, offerings of prostration and praise that come at the beginning of different texts. So generally for texts of the Vinaya dealing with the various ethics and so forth, one prostrates, bows down to the omniscient one, the all-knowing one. In general, for the texts that are contained within those of the Abhidharma or higher learning, as the main subject matter is wisdom and the special deity of wisdom is Manjushri, generally one makes a prostration to Manjushri before a text of the Abhidharma. And in the case of the sutras, one bows down to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, those who have mastered meditative concentration, which is one of the main subjects of the sutra texts. And so here, making this homage and praise at the beginning is the way that one properly starts out a text, and the homage can actually link with the kind of subject matter that is in the text.
Oh yeah, that chuba jebu go de tende de so ana se de tende zombi. Ani zomba chawe tar chimba da. Ani rani jiu tambi jeba de timba dan je be paja mi shong wa da. Ani do namga ji le kan ja da tei thoma jawa che se wa na si cheni. Ani jiu tambi jeba da timba cha. Ani dan je be paja mi shong wa da. that go teach. The Jizilama Nam Shiva Chabachibu Yude and a Kare and a Jiri Namdradi Nam Shiva the Manzi Yinzang. Ani Chamba Tomela Soak Jajin Jiji. Oni Ludu. Naya Jambayanda, Ludula, so Ma Jubagi, Ani Samataju, Alamanata. Tenita, Castle, Tender was there. Ani Yamichila Jukilama, Doji Chane, and March and Chevek, Teronala Sovaki, Ani Yamichila Kilamanam La Sovaki, Yana, Tada Di. Tomorrow my body carries and I chase him at Sergana. Chase him at Chibesi, Chima Tazi, Sishi Tala, many Sishi, Jawan Dojichan, so what is Jawan Dojichan. Rajam Shingu, Duni led every time Jawan, Tajidu, Jabocombo Jabayan. The Jella, I don't love him power Doji. Oh, that power Dojinam. Oh, that he could be in by the tomorrow my bed. And it's Jabayani, Jetonga, Chambola, Tatu Shasi by Zang. So the Aniji Jambayan, Kala Tawa, near Aniji Jambayan, then Miana dinner, and the castle Tawa nearby Zang. Jambayanji, Trigi, Leton, she was the Samba Daki Shat, said Leshan Boleva, Nachi, so the Aniji Jambayan, the Chokacha in body.
So then this is the purpose of doing a kind of homage and prostration, is to be able to complete the composition and to do so without any sort of interruption and obstacles, and also to demonstrate that one's activities are in accordance with the teachings that are being described. And so generally here where it says, I bow to all the high and holy lamas, this is in a general sense meant to refer to the lineage lamas, so those that have passed down the tradition of the profound view from Manjushri and so forth, that lineage of masters, as well as those of the far-reaching activity or the extensive deeds, and so beginning with Maitreya and so forth. So in a very special sense here, this is referring to those that are the part of the lineage of the practice, so the profound blessings lineage. And so here it says the word has the meaning that we see it given in the prayer called "Knowledge Unlocks the World." It refers to the victor, the diamond holder, the glorious Lord, gentle voice or Manjushri, and the hero of the diamond. So here in particular, in this case, as Tsongkhapa had direct interaction with Manjushri, this prostration is referring to that as the Lama or the teacher in this case. So now the Lord, Manjushri, was appearing constantly to great Tsongkhapa, so and appeared directly to him. So this is the particular kind of Lama that is being paid homage to here at the beginning.
Oh yeah. 之前别人把我多些，你把我多些那人是确确在说的。前别人呢，这装高啊，全部了，大多下水把人是，下水做那样，没那么多水把当，伢们那水把当。啊你，我是水把送月边拿呢，啊你我是水把送，我是水把在那样，啊你阿比水把有多去年，我那样往些了水把的，一些了水把你来。你呢？像个中国话全部那你那么大那米速度，俺那往些个，说俺比这话个说我是不是同那些钱呢？我是不是家呢？我是不是家话这是往些来些呢？我是不是家呢？俺你到达俺去吃，他们家就前边让把三把的是，
So now Manjushri appeared constantly to Lord Tsongkhapa, and there are different ways in which a deity can appear to someone. So someone can have a vision in a dream or in their imagination, or they can have a direct interaction. And so there are two ways of seeing directly the deity, either with your physical senses or with your mental sense. And so the way in which Manjushri appeared to our protector, the great Tsongkhapa, was straight to his physical senses. So it was as if they were teacher and student interacting directly in that way. There was no sort of distance between them. They were directly interacting in terms of the sense powers. And so they sat like teacher and student, and Tsongkhapa was able to learn from him every one of the sutra and Vajrayana teachings.
Oh yeah. 香港写记起来没？俺那看我的怎么怎么哦，看我的，俺那让你怎么怎么俺那感觉才把人300元讲，这种个我准备送你，俺那感觉确实看着是一样，就是这边样就马上把这家买，蛮大的书呢，看到书山那当。 俺呢，小气了啊！小气图怎么吃出存在上，最近了，俺呢，这前边样了，修俺呢干的修呢，俺呢这前边样个干的才把这事，
So we see there that some people think otherwise. They think that the Lord Jilama Tsongkhapa, out of some sort of ability of his scholastic ability and moral discipline, that he was able to write these various treaties. But the truth, though, is that there is not a single example of all of the writings of Lord Tsongkhapa, no single treatise, great or small, that was not spoken by Manjushri himself. So Lama Tsongkhapa consulted Manjushri in every single thing he did and followed the instructions however he was given, even down to where he should stay and how many attendants he should take with him when he went somewhere. So here, all of the texts written by J. Lama Tsongkhapa, we can have confidence that they came directly from the mouth of Manjushri.
Oh yeah, that's my Tongaji, some night Chabarachan. I know Marji Kawa Kunji Mato Pyongam, Pejingara with Kawa Kunji Mato, but Tamja Jang, Ani Jelame Danla Pamne Song, Tian Jiji Song less, and Jiji Jamayan Song less. Jelama Rangi, or to Song, but Tete Castle Danla Papa Tian. 마도바 타자 제라 메탄라 바바 태양 아니 지지제베야지 송래 송바는 마도 송바나신 마도 제라 마랑이지 어제도 송바 때나 메바타 때나 메바 와 다테 실단주나서 최제的他就拿去修啊拿去我们就把它我你全部的쳐봐我都见到我亲手的쳐봐说马羊늘 아니 라마라 되자 잡아니 치를 라브린당 캬바도 남조 남숨 유라게야데 아니 신이 된줄라 라레와라 거의 치도 아니 라마라 되자 잡아래 오야
So the Venerable Lord Lama Tsongkhapa was able to make definitive explanations of every deep and vital point in both the sutra and the secret Vajrayana teachings of things that all the sages gone before had never been able to fathom. So some might think that this is something that he came up from his own side, but rather these explanations are in no way something that Lord Tsongkhapa came up with on his own. They came rather from the lips of Manjughosha or Manjushri himself. So all of the teachings that J. Lama Tsongkhapa wrote down were given directly by Manjushri. And so in general, it is the custom when one writes the offering of praise at the beginning of a Buddhist treatise to express homage to compassion or the three types of knowledge or other holy objects. We see this in, for example, the ornament for of clear realizations pays homage to compassion and so forth. There are different objects to which one pays homage and prostrates and so forth. Here, though, the prostration is made to the lamas for a particular reason. Because it is intended to show the importance of relying on a spiritual friend at the beginning of the path as being an integral part of the path. So the point of prostration is to make the reader realize that this is all going to depend on how well he can follow the practice of proper behavior towards a spiritual teacher.
Oh yeah. And then 신이 된줄라 라레바 코유치도 라마나 되자 잡아인 어 텐더웨 라마나 되자 쳐봐 대양 가르레에서나 최쳐봐라 토마 라마 가쳐와 인단 가르레에서나 그시보도에 남도 주발라 남도서나 타바다 탐제 잡아 주바 남도 초와 타바다 탐제 잡아 주발라 라마라 가쳐와 메데스 아니 체디 차와 때네 체와 쳐발라서 아니 체디 차와 아니 미기 때네 아니 체외 쳐발라 토마 놈게 매바나 놈게 매바 미오나 아니 그래서네 저와 치망을 손에 오마 타바 아니 조문용 위사 타바다 탐지 잡아 들어와라 아니 라마 매바 가나 원숭 인자